Kamala Harris has officially selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Walz was elected governor in 2018 and re-elected in 2022. And so we now have the official matchup for the 2024 election. It's going to be Harris and Walz versus Trump and Vance. And in this video, I will be updating my 2024 electoral map prediction in light of Harris's vice presidential pick. We're going to fill in the solid states for both candidates first, starting off with the safe blue states. Kamala Harris is going to win Washington, Oregon, and California, as well as Hawaii, Illinois, New York. We're going to give Harris the benefit of the doubt here. New York could be between a 10 to 15% margin, but for right now, let's just be nice to Harris and Walz and put it in the safe Democratic category. We also have Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, the 1st District of Maine, Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. Even though Walz is the vice presidential nominee, that is not going to make Minnesota a safe blue state. It's been a very long time since this state has voted for a Democrat by more than 12 points. You'd have to go all the way back to 2008. As for Donald Trump, he is on track to easily win the states of Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, nearly all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, as well as Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, Alaska, the 2nd District of Maine, J.D. Vance's home state of Ohio, and yes, even Iowa. It might be neighboring Minnesota, but that's not really going to make too much of a difference. Iowa is going to be a safe red state. And so with these solid states filled in for both candidates, we have 167 for Harris and 149 for Trump. And so obviously this pick of Walz for the VP slot represents Harris's dire need to pick up upper Midwestern states, of which Minnesota is one of them, but more importantly, she has to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. She probably would have done better in Pennsylvania if she had gone with Josh Shapiro, who is the governor, and in the end, it came down to Shapiro and Walz, and there were just too many issues with Shapiro as a candidate, too many past issues that the Democrats didn't want to have come up during the campaign, and so they decided to go with Walz, who was a safer choice, but arguably he may not have been the best because Minnesota is not nearly as competitive as Pennsylvania. And so now we're going to get into the likely states for both candidates, starting off with the likely Trump states. We have first off the state of Texas. This is going to be a big prize for the former president, 40 electoral votes. He won the state by 5 points in 2020 and 9 points in 2016. There's no way Kamala Harris is going to get within a 5-point margin. Even Joe Biden wasn't able to, and he ran under much better circumstances for Democrats when they were in a much more favorable position to flip a state like Texas blue, and he didn't even really come close. So Texas is probably going to be decided by a double-digit margin this time around, and Florida, 30 electoral votes from the Sunshine State, is going to easily go to Trump. He won it by 3 points last time, but even since just 2020, the state of Florida has taken a huge shift to the right. Trump won it in 2016 as well. He's never lost in Florida. He's done very well in the state, and so have many other Republicans like Rick Scott, Ron DeSantis, and Marco Rubio, the 2 senators and the governor. The state of Florida is now safely within the likely red category, and so this will put Trump up at 219 electoral votes. Before we continue, only 11% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. We're now going to get into the likely states for Kamala Harris, starting off with Colorado, 10 electoral votes. It is not going to be an easy victory for the vice president. Joe Biden carried Colorado by nearly 14 points. That margin's probably going to be cut in half this time around. It's going to be significantly more competitive than it was in 2020. Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden. Joe Biden is arguably a better nominee 4 years ago than Harris is right now. Yes, Biden would not have made a good nominee for 2024, but 4 years ago, he did win the election, and he did do a lot better than many people expected. Kamala Harris is probably not going to perform it nearly as well. We also have the state of Maine as a whole. The margin's probably going to be around 5 to 7 points, still a dip from Biden's 9-point margin in 2020. The polling in Maine has been pretty shaky for Democrats. Republicans are on track to do much better than they have in the last few years. If we get more numbers, I would move it into the lean category, but for right now, it's going to stay likely blue. We also have New Jersey. Just like New York, these two states are places where Democrats simply aren't doing as well as they should be, mainly because of scandals. In New York, we have a very unpopular governor, very unpopular mayor of New York City, and Andrew Cuomo, who was governor just a few years ago, had to resign because of sexual harassment. He was a three-term governor, and so a lot of people have simply lost trust in Democrats in these states. And of course, in New Jersey, we had Bob Menendez, who has been convicted multiple times for bribery, and we have a competitive Senate election now in New Jersey to replace him, and that's probably going to make the presidential race more competitive too. Joe Biden only won New Jersey by 15 points. Getting that margin down to 10 points is probably not going to be too difficult for the former president. And the final lean state we have on this map is Minnesota. This, of course, is Tim Walz's home state. Now, Minnesota is not going to become a safe blue state just because you have the governor on the ticket. I mean, honestly, Tim Walz as a vice presidential nominee is pretty comparable to Tim Kaine in 2016. A lot of you might not even know who Tim Kaine was. Kaine was actually Hillary Clinton's vice president in 2016, her running mate, and he was a sitting senator and still is a current senator. He's actually running for re-election this year from the state of Virginia, and Clinton only carried the state by 5.3%. Joe Biden doubled that margin, and his vice president was from California. So really, having a vice president from a state doesn't automatically mean you're going to perform significantly better than you typically would. Minnesota, though, is a state that Joe Biden won by 7 points in the last election, so Kamala Harris can probably win it by around 5 to 7 points. In 2022, Tim Walz won his re-election by 8 points. Honestly, not the greatest margin. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan won by a larger margin, but Minnesota, it could be likely, could be lean, but for right now, we're just going to give Harris the benefit of the doubt. We're now going to get into the lean states on this map. These are the states that will actually decide the election, and I'm going to start off with the lean blue states, beginning with New Mexico, as Hispanic voters continue to move away from the Democratic Party, and of course, New Mexico being the only state with a Hispanic majority, Donald Trump is probably going to perform better than he did in 2020 when he lost the state by nearly 11 points. We've seen polling show that New Mexico is going to be a lot more competitive this time than it was in the last election. New Mexico will be lean blue as well, with Harris going with Walz. Walz has basically no connection to the Granite State and is honestly not going to help her at all the way up there. It is a state that was very competitive in 2016. Hillary Clinton came within half a percentage point of winning New Hampshire. And in 2020, yes, Joe Biden carried this state by 7 points, but it's probably going to get more competitive than it was 4 years ago. And finally, we have Virginia, 13 electoral votes. Again, the home state of Tim Kaine is probably going to be lean blue. Republicans are much more competitive in Virginia than they were even just 4 years ago. Joe Biden carried the Commonwealth by 10 points, but in 2021, they elected a Republican governor in a surprise election, and polling showed that if Joe Biden had stayed in the election, Trump was going to win in Virginia. Donald Trump actually took the lead in the state of Virginia right before Joe Biden dropped out. And so for right now, it's going to be lean in favor of Kamala Harris, really not where the vice president wants to be. And honestly, Tim Kaine as a running mate is just not the greatest choice. He's very forgettable. Nobody really knows who he is, just like nobody knew who Tim Kaine was in 2016, and just like nobody even knows who he is now, even after a very long and hard-fought campaign. So Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, you could say they're pretty similar in many ways. A lot of people find both of these women disingenuous. Obviously, it's not because they're women. That has really nothing to do with it. But the fact that they are simply not too liked. Hillary Clinton was very unpopular. Kamala Harris is the most unpopular vice president in modern history. And you add on top of them a boring old white man that nobody knows about, and honestly, they're not going to add too much to the ticket. We're now going to get into the lean Republican states, and all of them are going to come from the Sun Belt. I think it's pretty obvious what those states are going to be, beginning with the Tar Heel state, North Carolina, 16 electoral votes. Donald Trump is going to win. He won it by 1 point in 2020 and by nearly 4 in 2016. North Carolina could even be likely this election cycle, but for right now, we're going to keep it in the lean red category. Georgia as well. This might have been a state that Joe Biden won in the last election, but the margin was so narrow that it's going to be so easy for Trump to win it back. I mean, all Trump has to do is perform 0.25% better than he did last time, and he would win the state. And considering just how unpopular Harris is and how much more popular Trump is than he was 4 years ago, that does not seem like it's going to be too difficult. Democrats had the same issue in Arizona. Yes, they won the state last time, but the margin was so narrow, it simply isn't going to be that hard for Trump to win it back this time around. And so Arizona will be another lean red state. And finally, we have the silver state of Nevada. 6 electoral votes, not too consequential. Democrats and Republicans, neither really has to win this state, but winning it does signal that the country has taken a shift in either direction. And when looking at the state from 2016, it voted for Clinton by 2.4%, the same margin Biden won it by in 2020. So as a whole, the state has actually shifted to the right compared to many others. When the entire country took a shift to the left in 2020, Nevada stayed stagnant. And so Republicans are gaining. They actually won the governorship in 2022 against the sitting Democratic incumbent. And so the state is also going to be lean Republican in 2024. And this puts Trump just 2 electoral votes away from securing the presidency for a second time. And finally, we have 3 states left and 1 congressional district. Kamala Harris has to win all 3 of these remaining states if she wants to stand a chance at winning. And so we're going to give Trump the 2nd district of Nebraska first. It's going to be very close. This district, honestly, could be won by either candidate. It went to Trump in 2016, Biden in 2020. But for right now, we're going to give it to Trump. The district lines have changed since the 2020 election, and they are more favorable for Republicans as a whole. And so the first state we're going to fill in is Michigan, and we're going to give that to Kamala Harris. Tim Walz on the ticket is going to make a slight difference. He is going to give Democrats a slight boost in the entire Midwest, and that will include Michigan, which fundamentally is the most liberal out of these upper Rust Belt states. It voted for Joe Biden by the largest margin in 2020, and in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost it by the smallest margin when compared to both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. We also have, of course, the 2 other states, Michigan's neighbors, and these 2 states are going to be highly influential because Kamala Harris has to win. If Trump even wins one of these 2, he is basically guaranteed to win the election. So it's one of these, Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, that's probably going to be the tipping point. And so we're going to begin with Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes going to Trump. If Kamala Harris went with Josh Shapiro, she probably would be ever so slightly favored in the Keystone State, but the fact that she went with Walz basically means that she's giving up some of the prowess that Shapiro would have offered, and so it's going to go to Trump. It's still going to be very close. Wisconsin as well will also be lean Republican. It is going to be impacted somewhat by Minnesota being its neighbor, and so that's why it's not going to be lean, but it's going to be tilt in favor of the GOP, and so this will give Donald Trump and J.D. Vance 298 electoral votes, the Kamala Harris with 240 as a result of Tim Walz being chosen as the vice presidential nominee. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server, link in the description below.